I'd like to begin by acknowledging the First Nations people, the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are gathered, to acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land today, our sorrow for the costs of that sharing, and our hopes that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together.
And let us pray. Loving God, source of life, sustainer and sanctifier, you have brought us into being and ordained our place in the human family. You call us to live as sisters and brothers, to be responsible for each other and to care for one another. We give thanks for the lives of our brothers and sisters who have worked alongside us to build your kingdom on earth. And as we gather and share, may we be mindful of the many in our world who are denied the things that we take for granted, and those who are excluded from the opportunities that we consider as our rights. May our gathering tonight be a moment of awareness which builds to lives of solidarity with all people, and especially with the most vulnerable in our human family. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Paul, and also Pat. And now it is my real privilege to introduce both Jean Ker Walsh and Brian Smiddy, who I believe is well known, even more well known to many of you here this evening. I first knew Jean when I was just a young YCW member, and she was one of the key leaders, or had been one of the key leaders in the generation before me. And Brian, I knew from a number of YCW weekends where he came and gave his typical fiery talk on the rights of workers, the working class. He never let us forget the fact that the YCW, the Young Christian Workers, is in fact fundamentally a worker movement. And so it's a real privilege tonight to have both of you here. And Jean is going to lead the conversation with Brian. So I'll hand over to you right now, Jean.
Thanks very much, Stefan. It really is a privilege to be asked to join with Brian in this webinar and have an opportunity to share what I know to be an extraordinary life. Brian and I had a chat about how we would manage this 40 minutes or so that we might speak about some of the things that are in his book and his life story. We agreed that we'd do it a little bit in conversation. Brings back the memories of how we actually came to make this book, or as Brian used to call it, the pamphlet, how to make it happen, because we did it by Zoom. Most of the work was done by Zoom because it was during COVID. And we'd get onto Zoom at about 9:30, I think, or 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning usually, and we would go through Brian's memories and the sorts of things that we will share with you tonight, perhaps a little bit more coherently than we did in the book-making stage when I was privileged to be listener and scribe. So I'm going to do a little bit of the interviewing and prompting to Brian tonight so that we might pick up some of the key points, I think, that are in this book that will be recognisable to this audience tonight. And it is wonderful to be able to see names and the faces of names attached to names of people who through the generations before me and after me who have made this YCW life that I think we all live and would all probably say, this has shaped my life. And so I'm privileged to be among you. So let's, Brian and I, get into this. We won't spoil too much of the book, but we want to give you enough so that you have a sense of the sorts of things that made this a book worth writing and sharing with a wider audience. So, Brian, why don't we begin at the beginning? It's always a good place to start. Let's begin with your childhood experiences. So your birthday was just at the end of last month. So you're a wartime baby. And, you know, your first memories, I think, were, you know, from World War II and in that immediate post-war period. Tell us a little bit about Williamstown, where you lived in the suburb west of Melbourne, in those post-war years, and your first memories.
My first memories of Williamstown is I was with my mother and father. We're living in Castle Street, Williamstown, behind some pubs. And then we moved to Corrick Creek Road, 64. And we're there from about I remember we think we're there about 1946 to about 1950. I can remember the Second World War when the American troops were leaving the Williamstown Rifle Range and getting the trains up north, and they give us threepence or sixpence, go and buy them ice cream. Remember those days. I can remember the end of the Second World War. And then I suppose the dramatic stuff, if I can use it that way, is the separation of my adoptive mother and father about in 1946.
So Brian, that if we talk about that a little bit, because it was really I mean, you didn't see it coming at all. It was a shock to you. And of course, at that time, you didn't know you were adopted. Tell us about how you found out that your mother and father had separated and your mother had left the family. What happened that day?
My adopted father and mother married in 1937. Dad was born and bred in Williamstown. His wife, May, she came from North Melbourne. And in the book, Wilma Dooley, who is the daughter of Bill Dooley, who was my dad's boss. And my dad worked as an SP bookie and on the course for Bill Dooley. And she writes a very good paragraph, because for so long, I looked down upon May, but May was magnificent. She made me good clothes, took me here, took me there. But there was often many arguments in the house. My dad, all his life, had greyhound dogs. And if you know anything about dogs, especially purebreds, there's lots of diseases. That might have caused some arguments. There was no violence. But on this particular sad day, we used to always go to the pictures, you know, cowboys, Indians, all that stuff, Williamstown. And we'd stamp the feet. And this day I was told to go back to Grandma's place, not to come home. Do you do that? And then about 7:30 Saturday night, I can remember saying, Dad's coming and say, he's here. And what had happened, this is in Williamstown, North Williamstown, Bayview Street. We walked home to Cricket Road, 64, I suppose 10 or 15 minutes, and Dad said to me something like this: your mother's cleared out, taking this, taking that, and it's only you and I and 25 quid. And then all I can remember after about 6 weeks, I was in bed, crook, and the Dooley family, who lived at 74 Cricket Road, were very good. Wilma Dooley, the daughter.
Brian, thinking about that. So here you were. So you got no siblings. It's just from that time on, it's you and your dad. And you were about 9 then. Is that right? About 8 or 9?
46. So born in 38. 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I can remember the cricket on the radio. But yes, so I was with my father, and you do what you got to do. You know, dogs, cook, all that stuff. Went to school.
Because your dad used to actually breed the dogs. He just didn't have the dogs. Yeah. Tell us how many dogs. Tell us how many dogs he had.
My father had 50 greyhound dogs, and in the 1950s, the farmers were getting 1,000 pence a pound for wool, which was exported to China in the Korean War. We were getting £20 for any greyhound dog, which would chase rabbits, and they would chase rabbits all day, every day. And my father would say, go up to the railway station and see Mr. Smith. That dog, people paid their money order, post a note, and away we go. And we did that for 4 or 5 years.
So Brian,
£20,
you actually
£20 those days was the basic wage was 5. So he's doing pretty well. Thank you.
So Brian, you actually took the dogs, the greyhound dogs, on a leash up to the railway station,
Railway station, saw Mr. Smith.
handed them over, and those then sent around the country.
We sent them to New South Wales, South Australia, and Tasmania, not the Queensland or West Australia, too far away.
Brian, during that time, your dad, he had some blocks of land, that flood-prone land, and then you'd been living in the house, but after a while you moved onto the blocks of land, and you actually lived in a railway guards van.
That's correct.
What was that like?
Well, 1950, we had to get out of the house where we were because the man owned a house was a returned soldier, and he wanted his house, and you had to get out, Mr. Fenton. So we got Dad moved the railway guards van from the back blocks up to the front block on Corroy Creek Road. And the railway guards van, well, you know, we had a couple of primer stoves. The bed was up where the guards used to sit. We had nothing, no electricity, no nothing, and we had a water tap, just about 20 feet from the guards van. And in the morning we'd go and have a sluice. That's all you did. The next door neighbours were a horse trainer called Tommy Murdoch, and we had used their facilities to have a shower or something once a week. But and you've got to bear in mind we had the greyhound dogs, and they were number one. They were number one, and we had to look after them. So when Dad worked at the races on a Saturday, he'd go about 9 o'clock, and if the trots started in 1947 at night time at the showgrounds, he wouldn't get home at midnight. And my job was to make sure those dogs had water and looked after, and those dogs were treated as well. And the meat we got was from the local abattoir, and as Dad knew all his mates, and for 10 bob a week, the beer money, we'd get a spud bag full of bully beef. We'd put it in the drums and feed it to the dogs. And remember one night my dad said, "This is pretty good, we'll have some of this for tea." So that and some stingy nettles, that was the evening meal.
the bully beef and thistles, yeah?
Yeah, beautiful.
So, Brian, you were going to school at this time, so you went to the local Catholic school. Was your dad a religious man? Your dad made sure you went to the Catholic school?
Yes, Dad insisted on me going to school, St Mary's, Williamstown. I went there for 8 years. The nuns there, and they were very good. In fact, my father always said, if it wasn't for the Josephite nuns during the Depression, many, many people in the western suburbs would starve. And every summer, my dad would grow tomatoes, and he'd give me 2 kerosene tins, which chopped them up, and 2 kerosene tins, and away we'd go and take those tomatoes down the nuns, because that was his thank you to the nuns for what they did during the Depression. Fed many, many people. And I lift my head, thank you. And they got a lovely place now. If you're down there in Williamstown, in Morris Street, and that's where we used to have to go to.
And so, did you used to go to mass on a Sunday? Did your dad take you to mass? How did this growth happen in your religion and your faith?
Well, my father never went to mass because, like a lot of people, when the Depression came in the 30s, 29 to 38, the Catholic Church was very slow about picking up the bits and pieces, help people. The communists got involved. Now, my dad was never a communist, but he's very active. And he said, you've got to help people. Help people first, then pray, not the other way around. And Dad was a very practical man. But he always made sure I went to mass and all those things. And I remember going to hear that Father Peyton, the Rosary Man and Fulton Sheen speak at the exhibition buildings. And my dad he left school at grade 8, but he was well educated because working for a bookmaker, he had brilliant figures, brilliant. And that's where I learned a lot of stuff.
Your dad, as you told me, and it's influenced your life, I think. In many ways, he was a very cautious man, wasn't he? He trusted very few people. To be fair, he said, don't trust anybody. You keep everything to yourself. Don't let
women. He called them gas bags and all things like that. And don't trust them. Don't say anything to them. But I can say this to you. After they separated in 46, one particular Saturday, I was coming home from somewhere and I saw my adopted mother. The biggest fright of my life. Couldn't believe it. So I ran home, shut the door and went on the bed till Dad come home. She was frightened. What do you do when you're 8? No brothers, no sisters, no nothing, you know, a couple of holy aunts, things like that. So Dad was a very, very strong influence. And I can remember when we went out to live at 190 Cricket Road, which is out towards Altona. We had no services. We had to go and get the mail delivered. So one night we rode our bikes up to Footscray to see the local MP, a bloke called Mullins, a grouper. Turns out, and I'll explain grouper later on to you. And Dad said, what about the mail? He said, I don't see people sat and saying night. Well, Dad said, that's good. I'll vote for the bloke next door. Next time around. Come in, Mr. Smiddy. A couple of weeks' time, the mail come. And that's the way Dad operated. Never go to the bottom, go to the top. When something done, and I tailed behind him. Get the electricity on and all that stuff. And that's why my dad never took a backward step.
So, Brian, you were absorbing a lot of these things. You were also absorbing, and I'm just going to sort of summarise this, you were absorbing his behaviours too. For instance, you know, the listening to the ABC radio, always listening to the news, listening to the cricket. These are things that have stayed with you through your life. But I want to move now to the time in your life when you connected with the YCW. How did that happen? How did you get to know about the YCW being a young person in Williamstown?
The late Frank Hornby and I went to school together at St Mary's, Williamstown. And then Frank, the Newport YCW had a dance on. I went up there and a few of the mates I went to school with were up there. See, at Williamstown, there was a CYMS. There was a big clash between the CYMS and the YCW. I won't go on this, but it went up to Newport. And then Frank was there, and there was a priest there, an Irishman, Father Long, mad as a March hare. And anyway, they said, come along to a meeting. Anyway, so I went on, I don't know, it might have been Monday night, rode my bike through the flood waters because there's water everywhere, gumboots on, and then I went. And they talked about migrants. Well, I didn't know what they're talking about because where I lived, there was the Altona migrant camp. There's 5 camps for displaced people within a stone's throw where I live. And I met Frank Hornby, and away we went. And then later on, I suppose the first person was Brian Burke grabbed me. He asked me to come to speak to a seminary in summer school about life. Well, I don't, I mean, with me, you wind me up, you shut me up, the way I went. See, they didn't know what they're talking about, but I did because I went to mass there, went and knocked on their doors and things like that. We walked our dogs, they come and talk to us. So the YCW was everything to me, everything. And Brian Burke is one of the first. The other thing was most probably when Father McCann, and Leon McGree's here tonight with us, wonderful Leon. When my father got buried after he died sick in December 1957, there was a mass at Williamstown. Father McCann was there, Leon and Brian Marshall and I. We went to communion together. Nobody else went. I can remember that vividly. And Leon and I and Brian Marshall in the YCW actively for years. Then Father McCann come and saw me about, Dad died 57, about 50, late 58, 59. He said, this is my words, I'm not saying the exact words, this is not much of a place for you. He said, why don't you come down to my parish in Hyatt? And that's where I went. And I got a combination down there at 204 Hyatt Road, Hyatt. And that's where I met the great Kevin Vaughan, who's here tonight, and all those other great people. And Father McCann, without a doubt, had a very big influence on my life. And so did Father Kevin Toomey, because Toombs was Toombs, but, you know, if you want something done, you want a solicitor, right, boof, Leo Brown, up you go to Lygon Street. So those two men were very influential. And the YCW, as Martin Flanagan said when he interviewed me, I don't know, about just, you know, when I retired or something like that, said, the YCW became my family at the time of my death of my father. And that's true. And I met all those great people.
By this time, Brian, you were a young worker. You were an apprentice by this time. Tell us about becoming a young apprentice. How did that come about?
Well, my dad, there was a government printing officer, and he used to work with a bloke called Bang Bang. And that was his nickname at the races. And Bang Bang worked at the government printing office. And he said, what about becoming a compositor? There was no vacancies at the government print office. So I went across to Mr. Muir, the Catholic vocational guidance officer in Queen Street. He sent me up the Apprenticeship Commission. The Apprenticeship Commission in Russell Street said, across there is the Spectator Publishing Company, the printing division of the Methodist Church. And that's where I did my apprenticeship. Wonderful, wonderful people. Beautiful. And I learned a lot from there. So I did apprenticeship for 5 years. And if I may say so, being a union man, Dad said, go, get asked to join the union. Well, Blakely fell over. First year apprentice to join the union. So I went to the trades hall. I said, I want to join the union. And there's a fellow there called Ken Stone, the famous Ken Stone, who was one of the first early YCWs, and said, by all means. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, the poor old bloody collector had a go at me, threw a punch at me, Alec Morrison, because he got his ears chewed by Stoney because he wouldn't sign up apprentice. But that's when I got involved in union because, you know, Dad's motto was no ticket, no start. And I was in the union from then. I'm still actively going to union meetings.
And Brian, after your dad died and he'd been in hospital for, 6 months or almost 6 months, you actually found out then from Bill Dooley that you were adopted. You might have suspected something, when you were younger, but you didn't really know. How did Bill tell you?
1957, my dad went in hospital. Because later on, I thought about, he had a big, I remember many years earlier, he had a big stitch under here. And I think he used to roll his own cigarettes and he had cancer. Now that's before I come along. And he was in Cabrini Hospital for 6 months. And the Dooley family is magnificent. And I remember this particular Sunday going along Dandenong Road, St Kilda, after leaving the hospital. And Bill Dooley, as I call him, Uncle Bill, said to me, you know your dad's not going to live. I mean, I had no idea. Anyway, and then he said to me, you know you're adopted. Well, I had a fair idea I was adopted, but I was never told. But, you face life. And without the Dooley family, I wouldn't be here today. I'm ever grateful to the Dooleys. But, you take those things on the chin. But for a long time, I must say, people say to me, where's your mother? I said, well, she died. But she didn't die. They just separated. Because, you weren't told things. But anyway, I just got on with life. To me, it was important. If you had to do something, do it. Don't put it off, do it.
Brian, in those days after your dad had died, and you're a young worker, you're doing your apprenticeship, your involvement with the YCW was increasing. You actually used the car, I think, that you inherited from your dad. You used to go to work and then you'd go to YCW meetings all over the place, yeah?
I remember going to a meeting of the Preston YCW. And one of the fellows there is now retired priest, Brian Glasheen. I went out there by train and tram and home by train and tram. And anywhere on the executive of the YCW, or Leon, and other people, men and women, here tonight, going out to groups. Often Bernie Doherty, late Bernie Doherty and I would go up to places like Sunbury, Trentham. You name it, we went there to talk about the YCW. And I might speak pretty fast, but anyway, that's my enthusiasm. But the Cardijn story, I say this, I only hope the YCW doesn't wither away. It's so important. It's the practical side of Christianity. People say to me, pray. Well, I don't believe in pray. Life is prayer. But help people. That's what I was taught to help people, and then you do the rest later, follows. So the YCW went all over Melbourne. In Australia, I worked full-time in Bunbury Diocese in 1960. And 1961, I worked in Tasmania, at my trade in Tasmania. And that's where I met Johnny Penrose. And I've been mates a long while. And also in the West. In the book, I named some of the people there. And I still got contacts in the West. People like Brian Moylan, who lives there now, but other people too. Stefan lived in Perth for a while. I used to ring Stefan. Because one of my loves in life is getting on the end of a phone and talking to people. I love it. It gives me solace and gives them solace. So I worked in those two. Most probably nobody else was prepared to go to those places, but I didn't mind.
So, Brian, I want to take you, because I'm just keeping an eye on the time and we're truncating what's quite a long story, but people will be able to read it for themselves. So you did work as an extension worker in WA. You then worked as an extension worker in Tassie. And then after that, you were asked to go to Rockhampton, but you felt it was going to be too hot there, so you declined to do that. And really this led to your time with the YCW coming to an end. And you then you finished your apprenticeship, and then you began working at the Victorian Government Printing Office. And
this is 1961.
Really, yes.
1961.
So, yeah. So you shifted your mission, if I can put it that way, within the YCW. You shifted it to your workplace, and then really within your union life, but at your workplace. So tell us how you used to connect with the workers at the Victorian Government Printing Office, your workplace. How did you do? What sort of thing?
I first went there in 63, about 63. You know, you couldn't get work anywhere at all because it's very tight. In fact, a lot of people might remember Arthur Cornwall got within 400 votes becoming Prime Minister of Australia in 1961. There was 400 votes for the Communist Party, kept Pig Iron Bob Menzies in government. But I won't go all the detail. But I got a job there, and there was a workplace group there called the Chapel. It was on its last legs. So I said to Blake, well, as far as I'm concerned, it won't be on its last legs. So myself and another Blake got together, and we got the committee going, and the government printing office had been going a fair while. But in the first 12 months of being there, they had a strike. And that was all right. We got to quit out of it. All the government workers in Victoria went on strike against Bolte and Ryder. And the bloke said to me, excuse the expression, you're a bastard. He said, I've been here 50 years and I never lost a day. Only day I ever lost was going on strike. I said, well, you got your quid for that, didn't we? And but the government printing office was my base from 63. And then they said to me, the workers, not me, said there was a vacancy in the union office. They said, we want you up there. So away I went. And I became a full-time official, I think, in 67, something like that. Yeah.
And during your time as a full-time official, you also held the office of president, a couple of years and so on. But I'm interested to have you talk and share with the group the way you actually, your modus operandi as a union organiser. So let's talk a little bit about the way you used to work on the shop floor. When you went to visit a workplace, just run through a little bit about how you used to connect with people.
Every place is different, but I treat them all the same. I was given a list of shops to go to in Footscray area, Reservoir area, the country of Victoria, and that was my job to make sure things were going well. So in I'd go, as long as you got permission from the boss to go in, you were okay. And away I went. I'd go and look who's the union rep, but I just wouldn't listen to them. I'd go and speak to all the members. Everyone, singly. What's your name, so forth. And I'd say to them, if you've got a problem, here's my business card, give me a ring. And I loved it. Some of the officials couldn't believe what we did. At North Peregrine in Wodonga, 3 o'clock in the morning I'll be there, up seeing the workers. Visiboard, one of Richard Pratt's place, where the bloody floor was flooded with water, and the people working there we referred to as the factory fodder. These are the people who came out from Europe, working on machines, no conditions. We soon gave them pretty a touch. So many of the top union officials looked after the newspaper workers, where Val Noon worked, The Age. We looked after the others. The people made the cardboard boxes, the paper and all that. And you went in there and I got banned from one place in particular. If the boss, I hated strikes. I detested strikes, but if I was forced to it, I'd do it. But this particular place, I'd give them touch them up a bit, and so the heavies come in and pull me out. And I thought, well, it's not pretty fair. But I know the workers. I got them all together and I said, now look, I've got to go elsewhere. But if you have sore back, sore wrist, anything like that, heart, anyway, 60 these 2 or 3 factories, 60 compensation claims. And Ted Parker, Morris Blackburn Company said, ever in doubt, make a claim. 10, I got 60. How do you want them? 10 at a time, 12 at a time. Anyway, later on, from my contacts, the boss said, where's that so-and-so be? And the blokes there, the stooges, said, he's elsewhere. Not really, he said, he's cost us thousands. I returned to one of the places. And in the book's a fellow called Peter Dwyer, who worked at Smorgan's.
Brian, just before you go on there, can I ask you to just shift your screen again? It just moved, and so we can't really see your face again. Can you just just a little bit? Yep, that's it. That's it. Perfect. Thank you.
It was reminds me of the night of the launch when I had my speech going. I hit that bloody microphone, and I prepared speech. You know what I did? Threw the speech out, and away I went, like I am tonight. But anyway, I went
you were
back
going
to
to tell us about Peter Dwyer, because I
Peter
can remember.
Dwyer,
because
Peter
you really.
Right, I don't know. Peter Dwyer is a very good friend of myself, Don Barron, and Kevin Davis, officials of all in the late 80s. Not Peter, and Peter. He was official. He was the boss at Smorgan's, and he said that my boss, well, he can come as long as he respects me. We did. But as soon as I got there, I knew that the place was going to close because Pratt was spending millions on his factories. He didn't have to, wasn't a public company, so he could, family make the money. And I could see, anyway, so what we did, I said, and many of the people there, Maltese, Italian, they knew I was there, and all those, strike Brian. I said, no, hold your horses. And they listened to me. Anyway, we put what I call the insurance claim on. So many weeks paid for each year of service, all untaken sick leave. So as the workers had some benefit if they did close. They did close. And Peter Dwyer was part of the negotiations of that, and we did that. So in your industrial relations, you've got to use your noodle. Some officials believe strikes everything. Look, strikes nothing. It's the easiest thing in the world to get the workers out. The bloody hardest thing is to get them back. Get to know the workers. Have good delegates. Be honest. I can remember in enterprise bargaining, I'll get back, a lot of the agreements, they put it to the members, all those in favour. I didn't do that. I always had a ballot. All the workers entitled to a ballot. And there's a bloke called George Widdowson, who's the industrial relations manager of containers. They said, if Smiddy's run it, it's honest. And that's the way I operated, always. And got some very good results to the members. So I had a lot of faith in workers. Long as you're fair to them with them. Long as you're fair to them. Don't tell them bullshit, excuse the expression.
Brian, let's just pause now, and I want to let's just for a little time. I'd like you to reflect a little bit about faith and this continuation of the faith that you that grew within you as a young person, as a young Christian worker, and then how that continued on during your working life. And let's just have a little reflection on that. And then I'm going to open it up for questions to see what people might like to draw from what you've said already. Or, well, let's do that. But so can you just give some reflection, please, about how your faith, why wasn't it diminished by what you saw in the workplace? Why did it get stronger?
Yeah, I would every 3 months go and see somebody, mostly priest, but Brian Burt was here. And I go down and have a meal with him. And they give you something, what they call sustenance, nourishment. What about this Ted Long from the cooperative movement and other people? And I branched out into things like union. I was on the union executive within 6 months, put somebody's nose out the bloody joint, that doesn't matter. Got on the federal council. I remember I went to the federal council and I met this bloke, I won't mention names, but I'd been drummed that he was a member of the CP. Anyway, I said, tell me his name. I said, he dealt in gold. I said, you're a traitor to your cause. Well, Christ. CP, member of the Communist Party. CP, member of the Communist Party. Look, treat people with respect. If they're telling you bloody lies, so forth. But in the union, I was on the federal council because we had to bring the printers union into the 20th century because the only people in the printers union that got a bloody good go were the newspaper workers. The people at the bottom making the cardboard boxes, or people more Pogue and Wodonga, they treated like dirt, not with me. So away we went, myself and a few of my mates, and looked after men and women and apprentices. There's a story in the book about some boss going to cook, but I'll let you tell this. He thought I was bloody mad. Well, I'm not. Might sound mad, but I get bloody mad when the bosses don't look after the workers. And that was my job.
Move on. Yeah.
My life, I got heavily involved, got married on the 2nd of May 1970. That morning went to the union meeting, got married in the afternoon, and my lovely wife here, 53 years, who supported me through and through, went to the union meeting, didn't tell them where I was going, and away I went. But locally here, I got involved heavily in the local community. Labor Party. I remember John Cain saying to me, I didn't know Barrow Soap, but he came knock on my door one day and was new electorate, and I was sick and tired of people like Doug Elliott. Some of you might remember him, brown goo jads, you know, that rubbish. I said, I don't want any more of them. Full time. You don't live in the area, no, I won't vote for you. Anyway, he convinced me after a while. And I went to his first campaign meeting and the last campaign meeting. And my dear friend Phil Oates over here knows the story better as well as I do. You wouldn't get a more honest man in Australia. John Cain was magnificent. And so much I'm prepared. He told me this, that the Hawke-Keating governments of 1983 to 1996 didn't treat Victoria fairly economically. He said that to me, mainly because he was opposed to uranium mining. But he said he wouldn't do anything to embarrass Hawke or Keating on that question. That was a very topical subject in the early 80s and 90s. But Cain, after he retired, I'd meet him, but a beautiful man, and they trusted him and they trusted me. So, yeah, well, as campaign manager, all those things. You know what I did.
Brian, let's just pause there, Brian, if we can. Because we are going to run out of time, and I do want to make sure that if people do want to ask questions, they can. Any questions? So, well, if there aren't just at the moment, I'm just going to pick up on, Brian, you were talking about John Cain, and I know because I worked for John Cain during a period of time and as an advisor, and we came to know in the advisors that if a letter came in from Brian Smiddy, and it was usually a handwritten letter, that they didn't get dealt with by the advisors, they were dealt with by the Premier himself. I knew that he had huge respect for you, and you did say to me that you would die for that man. It was such a strong relationship and one of great trust and respect, and it worked both ways. How did you I saw some of that on the launch of this book, where, as you said earlier, there were 122 people there. I didn't think they'd all turn up. I was one of the people saying, no, that won't be that many, Brian. But we were knocking them back, really. And there were a number of people politicians who wanted to be there. One of them presented you with a letter from the Prime Minister. This was an acknowledgement by a wide, diverse group of people of you and your life across the years. What did it mean to you as a person? Because at the same time, I would say that you're a humble man, but what did that sort of moment mean to you?
Well, I'll mention a person called Andrew Giles, Minister for Immigration. We were in his electorate in the seat of Skellum. In the early days, some rat bag from the left was trying to knock him off, beat him. I said, well, mate, you've got to fight on your hands and you won't win the seat without him. Andrew Giles is a good man. At an ALP conference, some person got up and made some allegations against him. And like sheep, they all stood there, but not Smiddy. Up I got on my feet. I said, fancy so-and-so talked about principles. He wouldn't be able to spell the word. You know, volume I went, oh, you can't say that. I always stood up for the person who was fair dinkum. Andrew Giles, to me, is a good man. He's got a difficult portfolio, but he's honest. And that's all you can ask for, honesty. And that's one thing about John Cain. Any gifts of John Cain were sent back with a thank you note. And I know sometimes some of the people who got the thank you note weren't very happy with it. I won't mention the thing I've got in mind. But Cain was a good man. And we went going to lunch with a bowl of soup. Then we'd have a toasted toasted sandwich, and I'd say, he'd say, "Two for this bloke, he's good on the tooth," and a cup of coffee. And he always had his own stamp for own mail. He always turned up, never asked for anything, gave his life for the Labor Party. I mean that, because some other people, even for the left, you know, he wouldn't give them a feed. I won't mention their names. But Kane was, to me, was a beautiful man. And he used to say, he'd ring me up and say, "What's up the hall, comrade?" Brother, as he used to call me. And in cabinet, used to refer to say, "My advisors say this." And a few of them just scratch their head. Who's his advisors? Well, later on, we learned after he died, something like that Alan and Brian Smiddy were his advisors. He rings up about this, that, the other. A beautiful man. And Victoria's lost for him. I know he made blues, but we all make blues. But as I said to people, I'd give my life for Kane. Nobody could ever take him on for being dishonest and things like that. And the same with the Printers Union. I want to say to the Printers Union, they were very good to me. All people on the Printers Union delegation were elected by the members, not appointed. And people like Ken Stone, all those people. So I thank you. And if I can, I'm watching the clock, I just want to say, there's a lot of people I want to say is to Bill at Arms School. Bill is not too well. We hear he's making recovery. But to Bill and Bernie, when I was in West Australia, nowhere to live, Bill said, "Go and stay with my place for 6 weeks." Went there, stayed for 10 years. Wonderful. Home away from home. And so Bill and Bernie and I call ourselves brothers. Thank you. And there's many other people I want to thank. I can't mention them all, many of you people, but I've been pleased. And what keeps me going is my prayer. Now, I know some of my friends say, "Well, religion's all bull dust." Well, it's not to me. Not to me, never. Well, religion, church, what it might be. And recently I had time to query, and the local parish priest here, Father Steve Rigo, he said the words in his homily was trusting God. So if you have trust in people, you have trust in God. And my great friend, Peter Stars, one of the greatest YCW person from South Australia, Starsy said to me when he died a couple of years ago, he said, "I've been speaking to God." No, I'm not claiming that, but my faith guides me, and I've always tried to be honest. Difficult bit times, but I got no worries about that. I say so in the book proudly. I proclaim, and the left in the Labor Party, the left and the right wouldn't know. I belong to no faction, so it's only one faction, Smiddy's faction, and I get up to speak my mind. They didn't like that. That didn't matter, but I've had a great time. I thank you, good people, and I'm 86 last Saturday or Sunday, whatever it was, but I'm ever grateful. But the thing was, I love to speak, and I'll finish with this story. Jerry Hand, who was a federal federal minister and a president of the Labor Party, he said to my next door neighbour, he said, "I had to put up with Smiddy. He spoke 14 times at the ALP conference." Well, magnificent, 14 times. Point of order, move the question we output, all those things. And sometimes, I'll definitely finish with this, the left at one meeting said they wanted to doctor the minutes of the meeting. They said, "We can't do that because Smiddy reads them." Well, yes, certainly I do read the minutes. Thank you.
Smorgasbord of different speakers, lots of different forms, and some of my absolute favourites.
Hey.
Could I jump in with a question? Or maybe I don't want to stop anybody else from having a question, but I did think of one, which because Brian did mention earlier about how important the YCW was to him. I just sort of a double-barrel question. What would you say to young people today about the YCW to encourage them? And secondly, what would you say to the church about how important the YCW is? If you've got any thoughts on that.
Definitely, it's a good question. There's a priest in Port Augusta, Father Jim Monahan, and there's a priest down in Rosanna, Nick O'Connell. Great priests. Jim Monahan in Port Augusta has had a couple of groups going recently. If the YCW is going to exist, we need the support and encouragement, and we're going to get in their ears and bash them about the YCW, because it's talking about life. There's life there, there's prayer there, it's all one. What are we doing now? This is prayer. So, saying the rosary, all right, do what you wish. I don't say the rosary, but I get up in the morning now, 6 o'clock Sunday morning, I watch Mass on television. I don't, because I'm not driving as much. But the YCW is fun without, look, if the YCW is let If the church allows the YCB to fade away, God help us. And that's why the new Bishop of Cairns, who was a Vicar General in Melbourne here, he's up to Cairns. I see him as a hope. And the priest, the Bishop of Parramatta. The YCB is fundamental. No, so as far as the church goes, well, look, I said I'll film there a while ago. I call them the Holy Joes, you know, have this, no vino and all that stuff. I said, look, if you don't do something soon, call the auctioneers and sell the place off because there'll be nobody here. You and I might be here, but they won't be here. But I'll be there for a different reason. I'll be there because I'm thinking of people like my mate John down at the shopping centre. John lives in Reservoir, one room, lonely fellow, he's 70, 80, and I see him most days, have a cup of coffee with him and people like him and others around. Got to love people, and because people loved me when I was down there at the bottom. The Dooley family, the Armstrong family, and many, many other people, very kind to me. And I hope I've been kind to them. Thank you. My mate Phil Oates there, gentle giant, wonderful fellow, Phil. 7 Hall Court, Wodonga.
I see a couple more people got their mics unmuted. Does that mean that you're wanting to ask a question or say something? I think now's the time to jump in. Yeah, Mark, go for it. I can see your hand up there.
Hello, Brian.
Oh, Mark, good to see you, mate.
Yeah, you too. Brian, I remember the first time I think I met you, you went into it, we were in a big hall and you called everybody to attention and you made them all give subscriptions. And I was blown away at how confident you were. You were very confident. And you spent your time
at the meeting.
You made them all give money. You made everybody give money to the YC. Yeah. They all gave money. And you did a big whip around. And I just noticed how confident you were. Like no one said no to you. And then you go to all the shops, you know, as a union student. How did you become so confident?
Would you believe in it? Yeah.
Well, I believed in a cause. Look, I never asked anybody on election day. I'd go from 6 a.m. to midnight. And I never asked anybody to do something that I wouldn't do myself, whether it's as a shop steward, union official. My mate, Donnie Barron, he called me in. There was a printing company down at Lentern. I'm the accountant. Well, I know nothing about accountancy, but I know how to talk. And anyway, this bloke, Wally, his name would come back, still a book, and he wouldn't pay. And all of a sudden, his wife pipes up, well, time to pay. Either pay, otherwise you've got problems. I said, buddy, I think he's got problems. We won't be pulling off this time. And he copped up and paid. So look, if you're confident and you trust people, like the workers, a Vietnamese worker got hurt at a place called Deco, Australia, working hand all gouts out. And I was horrified. Anyway, went and saw him in the hospital. At the Panch Hospital, there were 5 other workers from other factories, other unions. Got their names, got their addresses, went to the union office. You got a bloke so-and-so. When I went back to that factory, Deco, a week or so later, the 50 or 60 Vietnamese people all knew me. Brian, how are you? Welcome. Because I loved them. They were good then. And the boss, I chewed his bloody ear because the boss put a bloke on a machine and he wasn't skilled, wasn't trained. So we got responsibility. I'm not saying all union officials are bloody good. There's some crooks around, you know. Norm Gallagher's one of them. I'll leave it at that. And there's a few other crooks around too. But and they didn't like what I did because I get up before a mic and tell the truth. Look, it's no good, excuse the expression, bullshitting the people. Jesus didn't tell bloody lies. Why should we tell lies? We shouldn't tell. Be honest with people. And so I was trained by my father. Be honest. And he told me a few stories about people trying to take him down when he's working as SP booking and things like that. Well, you know, I got no physical skills, but I can talk my way. So I'm careful, but if you love people and trust them, they'll always respond. Always, never yet. You know, Visi board, like at Reservoir, we'd have 200 members there. And Pratt philosophy, if you order carton today, you'll get it tomorrow. Beautiful. So We'd hit the place for $20. And Dick will be there. He wouldn't talk to us. He'd send his underlings down. We say, Dick, it's $20. We're going home at 4 o'clock. 5 to 4, he produced the goods. In writing, by signed. Had to be in writing. Words no bloody good from those people. So, and the workers loved it because, you know, it says in the book there, when I come to meet, I always get a full attendance. Well, certainly I would. And you see a part in the book there about page 81, Brian Callahan, where he's got me a pair of shorts and there's a rhyme there about Smiddy. That's true. That was a Pac Pacific, you know. And when I negotiate with the employers, I didn't make statements. I asked questions. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do that? And by doing that, you get information, intel, and Peter Dwyer affirmed that.
Brian, perhaps I might just at this point say, I think you get a sense of what our Thursday morning Zoom sessions were like. I warned you earlier, Brian can be a little bit like a Gatling gun. And but what I always found was that the threads of Brian's stories, they always came together and coalesced. And what we've done with the book is to do that, I suppose, and to present you with something that is a coalesced story of a lot of these wonderful memories that Brian has, and stories of the way in which he lived out the life and the mission that he felt that he had as a young worker, as a mature worker, as a unionist, as a person in his community, as a husband and a father. It's there in the book. He has got some copies of the book left. I have put into the chat the information that you might like to copy or take hold of that allows you to order a copy of Brian's book if you are interested. And I'd encourage you to do so because it is a great story. I think it's one that does us proud, and I say us in terms of the YCW. It's been very interesting to me to see that people in the community, librarians, Brian and I are booked for later in October to actually speak to his community at the local library where he lives. A number of libraries are carrying Brian's book, and it's a way in which the story of the YCW and the importance of it in our lives is made permanent and is on the record. It's a contribution, it's not the only one, but I think it's a worthwhile one and I'd commend it to you.
Can I just say this? That book is Jean's done a magnificent job. I'm a printer by trade. Thank you, Jean. Not only did you put up with me for 6 weeks, for an hour at a time, you've done a magnificent job. And it's a good book in the sense that it records my life as best we can. I was careful with the defamation laws, but you know, it comes from the heart, not from this. If you believe a thing, you do it. And I want to say to the YCW, present YCWs, the life of Peter Stars. Example, 1963 National Conference in Newcastle. He hitchhikes. Where are you going to sleep? Under the bridges. He takes a sugar bag with him and a gun. He said, I'll shoot a rabbit or two. When he gets to Newcastle, the police come around, grab him, put him in a slammer. Anyway, when Father Timmy come along, he was okay. Peter Stars, a great YCW people. Bernadette, Ellen, her sister's here tonight, McInerney. She's crook at the moment. Bernadette, you know, Helen Jago, great YCW people. And it's important that women, more so than ever, no matter whether you're old, young, or what, get involved in the community because men are bugging it up. We need the women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean and Brian. I just will make one little comment here before I hand over to Pat Branson, who'll say some closing words. I have got the details from Jean of the purchase of the book, so I'll take the liberty afterwards of emailing everybody that's registered for this webinar with the details of the book. So you'll have the opportunity to purchase it later. So yeah, I'd just like to personally thank both of you for being with us tonight. And I'd hand over now to Pat Branson, who'll say a few closing words.
Stefan?
Stefan, can I just say something? It's Ellen here.
Sure.
I just think that most of what Brian has been talking about has been with the unions and the YCW and that early Labor Party, but it
Could you
continued on.
just turn the camera so that we can actually see you? Is that possible?
Yeah, sorry. It continued on, whether it's been supporting the asylum seekers or being part of a group that of a Missionary Sisters of Service, getting a road stopped up in Watsonia that was going to cut the community in half. Those community things continued, and that to me has been the message of the YCW. But also in all this, his work and his meetings, he has supported me, and I could never have competed with Brian in similar groups, but I got involved and was able to get involved in the local community as well. Social justice at St Mary's, Citizens Advice Bureau. Jacinta is here from St Mary, did work at St Mary's, and we had a radical women's group going. So, you know, and Brian has been a great support, and I think that's important, as to look at that part of his life as well. And of our, wouldn't be surprised, but both our kids have got, and I don't think we try to browbeat them, but, you know, Michael going from working in a bank, then goes to Asia to work on aid project, or an organisation that worked on aid projects. Claire works at what's it called? An institute at Melbourne Uni, which is looking at disability or problems or lack of equity. So, yeah, I think I had a little say in it. I hope so. But no, Brian was the one who's also supported them. So thank you, Stefan. And thank you, Kurt.
Thanks,
Jean. Jean, it's been.
Thank you.
Jean,
well,
wonderful.
I think there's another webinar coming up.
Thank you very much.
I think there's another webinar coming up with Ellen. So
sorry,
I
Pat.
think, no, I think we've really got to make sure that we get your story too, Ellen. So there's another little project for us to work on. But for tonight, I think it's time to close. So Pat, if you're ready, I'll hand over to you to say a few final words.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Yeah, I was taken back to my childhood, Brian, listening to you. Not that my childhood was anything like yours, but in my childhood, I have memories of my dad telling me stories, and a lot of the stories were around workers. And my dad worked in the mines for a number of years, and then as a truckie for many years before he got out of all of that. And it reminded me of a conversation I was having with Gemma today while she was driving down to Mandurah, and I was sitting in the YCW office trying to make sense of the mess that was around me, the mountains of paper that had collected over the years. And really in that conversation, it was about the ordinary, and what is needed in our world today is that that awareness of the ordinariness of life, and the importance for us to acknowledge people and our equality, and that's what I took from your story today, Brian, and I'm really grateful, and on behalf of all who have been present here in this webinar, to thank you for sharing with us the ordinary life that is lived in an extraordinary way. And the extraordinary part of it, I think, is that that commitment to people, and the honesty that's required of that, and the courage and the faith. So on behalf of everyone, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Stefan. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you all.